Welcome back to Life of a Volleyball Player. In this video, our lesson is going to be about middles, so life of a middle in a 6-2 rotation. Now, middle's an interesting position because in the front row, everything pretty much revolves around a middle in a 6-2, again, for the front row. Back row, everything's revolving around where our setter is. So, middles, we have a little bit of extra stuff to talk about with you today. We're just going to dive right in. We're going to start with rotation 1. This is pretty much starting really easy, okay? Because as you can see, we are already in our base in the front row, so that's freaking awesome. So we're in our base. We've got middle hitter in zone 3, okay? So in our serve, kind of like I talked about in the last video for right sides, there are different defensive positions at the net to be in. Now, again, on my team, we are stacked at the net. We are about a little bit less than an arm's length apart, and we have our hands up. We're blocking the other side from being able to see where our serve is coming from. So just to kind of draw that out a little bit to help y'all out, it basically looks like this. Okay, we've got 3 people. My X's are not drawn very well. At the net, we've got our server, and then we've got our other people in the back row that we are currently ignoring. So again, we are right here. We are already at the net. We are already at our base. So that's serve. As soon as that ball goes over, we stay in base. Okay, everyone else moves, but we stay in base. And we're there. Our hands are up. We're ready to block, because that is our biggest role. As middle hitter, we are the biggest blocker on the team. So our hands should always be up above our head, or at least by our face, okay, ready to jump, ready to block all the time. Now, when we block, we come back down, and then we transition off the net to the 10-foot line. Remember, we want to get just behind the 10-foot line, ready to be able to hit that ball. Give yourself as much room as possible. Middle is hard. Okay, middle's hard because it's hard to see what's going on around you on the court unless you always have your eye on the ball. So my biggest advice for you would be to watch the ball. Make sure you're staying behind the ball at all times. So if our setter, for example, let me set this up. If our setter is right here, okay, our middle should be behind her. If our setter's right here, our middle should be right behind her. So that is kind of one of the keys. We are following our setter at all times. So that's serve. We just stay in our base. We're already there. We are ready to go in rotation 1. Rotation 1, serve receive. It's a little bit pretty much the same, actually. So all we're going to do is we're going to pull off the net, and we're just going to pull back to pass, okay, to help out our fellow players. Okay, remember, we're ignoring everything else that's happening on the court, so we're just pulling back here. We're ready to pass, and then ready behind that 10-foot line to attack as soon as our setter gets up from the back row. And then once we attack, we're there at the net again, okay, ready to block. Hands are always up. So that's rotation 1. Pretty simple, pretty easy. We're already in our base, so it makes everything a lot easier. So rotation 2 mixes it up a little bit because we rotate. Okay, so we're not in our base. But again, as I said, front row follows the middle. So as you can see on here, we are now in zone 2 instead of zone 3. And we're going to work with that. Okay, we're going to work with that a little bit. So when we are serving, so I'm going to have a server back here. We've got our back row we're ignoring. Remember, we're bunching up at that net. So we're here, here, and here. This is us, right? We can pretty much cheat over as close to the middle as possible, because all we have to do once that ball is served is take one step, set ourselves up in the middle, everyone else is moving around us, right? Pretty easy. And then again, transition off the net, approach for the ball, blocking, all of these things that middles are responsible for. It gets a little bit tricky when we get to serve receive. So I'm going to lay that out. Serve receive for rotation, for rotation 2. is what we're working on. So here's what it's going to look like. We're going to have our outside hitters pulling back, our libero is middle back, and our DS is pulling over. Okay, everyone's shifting from where they usually are. Setter is pulling up. Now, I am writing setter in because she is important. We do need to know where our setter is, and I know I've said this in I think every single video I've made so far. Setter is one of the most important people on the court because the whole reason we're doing serve receive like this is to make sure she can get to her base as easily as possible and everyone else is covering for that first ball. So what's going to happen is our right side is going to pull up to the net, and we're actually going to pull back into right side space. Now, I know I talked about this in the last video if you watched it for the right side, but I'm going to talk about it in depth again. What's going to happen is we're going to create a triangle. Okay? So we're going to create this triangle, and as soon as that ball is served, we're all going to move. So, setter's going to come up to her base. She's going to get ready to set that ball. Middle is going to come the long way, okay, to get to her base, down here to transition, and our right side is going to move over outside of the court to get to her base. So, biggest thing of serve receive. If you don't know what's happening on the court, get to base. Okay, play where you are, wait for that ball to get over the net, and then get to base. In this case, we're going to go straight to base. So that's the difference, is that in this situation, we are going straight to base. We're not waiting. We're not playing in another position. We are traveling straight to our base. We want to go around our setter because that gives us a lot of time and a lot of space to get back behind this 10-foot line. Okay, so pretty easy. All we're doing is, remember, our rotation spot was already in the right side, so we're just pulling back into the right side's transition right inside the court. You want to make sure you're staying inside the court at the beginning of the play. If you're standing over here outside the court, technically there aren't 6 people on the court, so we could be faulted for that. So we don't want to do that. Okay, so we're going to move on to rotation 3. Now this is interesting because if you notice, the middle that we were just working with has rotated to the back row, and we've got a new middle on the court. I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of go over a couple of different things. First thing I want to talk about is a triangle libero switch. Now here's how this is going to work. So this was our original middle, front row. Our libero was over here. Okay, what happens, this is why it's called a triangle libero switch. What happens is our libero is moving front row and our middle is moving back row. Here's the problem. Our libero can never play front row. Never, ever, ever. Okay, she's a special player. She can never play front row. So what's going to happen is our libero, instead of going front row, she's actually going to move back over to this spot. This middle is going to come off the court, and we're going to have a new middle come on the court over here. So that's what we have going on here. We've got our libero on the court down here. This middle, which is labeled, is going to be going off the court, and I'll explain why she's on the court right now, but for a triangle libero switch, let's assume she's going off the court, and our new middle is coming into the front row. Alright, let's clear this. So we have this kind of triangle libero switch happening. Now when this happens, 2 things can happen. One is that our middle stays back row to serve, if the coach lets her. Or 2, our libero comes in and serves. So I'll explain both of those situations. Let's go with the assumption first that the libero is serving, because I want to focus on what does this middle hitter do all the way over here. So we're rotation 3, right? We've still got a middle on the court. Middles, you still have to know what you're doing if you're in the front row in this position. So what's going to happen is in serve, we're going to do the same thing we've been doing. Okay, we're going to have our libero back row, she's serving. We have our 3 people bunched up at the net. And you're going to do the same thing that you did on the other side. You're going to kind of cheat over a little bit, just a little bit. Don't cross this middle person, right? We don't want to cross her because she's still in rotation next to us. We want to cheat over just a little bit. So all we have to do is basically take one step as soon as that ball is served, and we're already in our base. Okay, so everything's revolving around this middle in the front row. Everyone else is moving. We're pretty much just going towards our base. Now, serve receive is where it gets complicated front row. Always. This has been something I've been saying since the start. Serve receive is hard. Okay, I get it. That's why we're working through it. So, couple of things. We're going to ignore the back row again. A little bit. There is one key person that I want to focus on. That's our outside hitter, and then also our setter. So what's going to happen is our middle, us, we're going to move all the way up here. We're going to be in that top corner, as close to the net, as close to that corner as we can get. And here's why. Our outside hitter is going to pull back from the middle of the court and practically swap places with our setter. This is legal. This can actually happen. All we have to do is keep this outside hitter one step in front of all of our other back row players. Okay? Our middle is going to pull all the way over, so she's still on this side of our outside hitter. And our setter is going to pull up. But we need to make sure our setter stays at least one step below the middle. Let me draw this out a little bit clearer. Let me draw the lines that we're working with here. So, we have our middle, we have our setter, we have our outside, and we have our other back row. So remember, our outside needs to be one step in front of our other back row. Our setter needs to stay below the middle. And our outside needs to stay on the right of our middle. And of course, our setter can't pass this player back row. So you kind of have these little grid lines that you have to make sure you're staying in between. But then as soon as that ball is served, you go along on the front to get to your base. So what's going to happen is middle, you're probably not going to be playing a lot of that first rally, but as soon as that ball goes back over, you're in your base, you're ready to go. Okay. And then the last thing I want to focus on is something I don't think we talk about a lot, but I do want to focus on it a little bit. So back when we were on this court, we have two middle hitters drawn in on the court. We have one that's in the front row and one that's in the back row. So the libero can only serve for one of the middles. You can't serve for both middles. So one middle will actually be serving for themselves. So when that happens, where do we go on the court? What position are we playing? Now that depends on your team, but I'm just going to go over what we do on my team just so you have some basis of knowledge, some information that might help you out. So what's going to happen is going to be over here. We've got our front row, which now we're going to be ignoring because we're in the back row, right? And we are the middle hitter who is serving. In this situation, we have our DS, who is in middle back right now, and our setter, who is in who is in left back right now. So what's going to happen is everyone's going to sprint to a spot. Now, usually you would say, okay, I'm playing as libero, so I would go all the way over here, and that would be my base, right? But in most situations, our libero is the best passer on the court. So our next highest passers are going to be our DS. So we want the DS stepping in as a temporary libero. So what's going to happen is our setter, once that ball is served, our setter is going to sprint to her base. The DS is actually going to shift over and play as libero for this rally. And our middle is going to play middle back. Okay, so really all you need to focus on as middle is I am always going to be middle. No matter what, always going to be middle. Okay, so it's pretty self-explanatory. there's a couple of things in Server C that are a little bit confusing. Again, if you think I've left anything out or you have any questions at all, please let me know. And I will see y'all in the next video.